Welcome to the Next Move in Conveyancing podcast. I'm your host, Kev Tunnicliffe, and we'll be discussing all things property and legal. Let's get into today's episode. Big welcome again, everybody. This time it's the turn of the surveyor. So welcome to Joe Miller from Home Surveying. How are you, Joe? How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Good to see you. Just interested in what you're going to ask me.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you're going to tell me. For our listeners, tell us about your job role, how long you've worked there and how long in the industry.
Yeah, industry-wise, 20 years now. So historically corporate background, and then set up my own practice 4.5 years ago now. And we've built the business from one surveyor, and we're at 40 surveyors now, so I think we're one of the biggest independents in the country, which is a bit like a rodeo bull to hang on to, but I'm sure you know all about that yourself as things grow and things sort of, you bend yourself out of shape. So we're sort of proud of the business we've got. We're a survey-only practice. We specialise in giving consumers advice about what to do with their property, and ultimately understanding the biggest purchase of their life. So we obsess about the customer service element inside of that and make sure that people get what they need. And we work alongside you guys really well, I think.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's the first question, is take us through the different surveys available and what you offer at Home Surveying. Yeah,
so there are a couple of sort of key recognised survey products in the market. It's a funny industry because people call things different stuff, whether that's the right or the wrong thing. So level 2 home buyer survey, generally used on houses that are less than 100 years old or properties that haven't had significant works carried out on them. Level 3 survey, also known as building surveys, therefore older properties, properties that have had significant work, so if they've had significant levels of extensions, things like that, so we can make sure that those things have been done effectively. And we now offer a more detailed survey, which is a traditional building survey, which is about period properties, those kind of things, so much more detailed, and really understanding the sort of period fabric features of that property. And that's partly because as a business we've moved into an area now where we've got customers that are from a unique base, so in and around the Cotswolds. So we've started to look at the products that suit the particular client in those areas. And generally the products are carried out, some of them by the same surveyors and some of them by different types of surveyors depending upon their experience and backgrounds, those sorts of things. So it's an interesting market right now because people start to offer different stuff to the consumers, which is the right thing to do.
And do you think, so obviously we're broker fed,
yeah,
or introducer fed. Is it the role of the person to understand which survey and how to educate?
No, not at all. That's one of the key things really. With all referral partners that we ever deal with, we're always quite clear. Look, let us talk to the client. We'll work out what the right product and service is for that particular individual, because it's not always what it is on face value. You can look at a property and say, yeah, no, that looks straightforward. That's a home buyer survey all day long. And then when you look at a floor plan and you start to look at the particular property itself, and you can see from some of the Rightmove photos that there are issues with that property, you may upgrade that survey type. Sometimes consumers just want the most extensive survey. They want to spend the most money to get the best possible advice. Even when you try and sort of peel them back to say, look, it's not necessary for that property type, they will still go with that survey.
So really it's tailored, it's individually tailored pretty much for everyone then?
Yeah, you've got to have a look at each property. As I said, there are characteristics of the property that sort of set it to say, actually, that probably looks like that type of survey. But at times it is the best thing to do is to talk to the consumer about what the right survey for them is.
I mean, going back years and years to when I was advising, surveys never really came into it. It was something that was really driven by the lender.
Yeah, it's grown loads.
If you have the basic lender valuation for mortgage purposes, or you could invariably most of them would offer a home buying survey.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go up to the next level, it was the good old yellow pages you had to go, flicking through the surveyors of the area to do it. What is it now that's really caused that explosion? Because we've seen our instruction numbers for surveys, probably 400% increase in the last 3 years. It's mammoth.
There's a number of factors. So a factor that back in my corporate days, I used to be doing valuations for HSBC, for example. We would send the customer a copy of that valuation. We'd collect the money from the customer for that valuation. The surveyor would visit the property for that valuation. To all intensive purposes, that consumer thought they were having somebody go and look at the house from a survey perspective. They thought they were looking at condition. So some of it was about misconception. At a point, I don't know, you'll know better than me, Kev, but 8-10 years ago, more and more of the lenders started to decouple valuations away from survey. And they did that because, one, they didn't really want the liability of the condition element of that. And two, it was slowing the process down. They wanted to just get the valuation into the system, get the response from the surveyor, and subsequently get the thing moving, because service level is absolutely paramount in that world. And then now you've got, you look at the industry space, this story's been told for a number of years, and I've told it for a lot of years. You look at product transfers are on the increase. You look at desktop valuations, AVM valuations, all of which are on the increase. Physical inspections are dropping off. So that conception from the client about somebody's going to see my property doesn't exist as much anymore. And that accelerated tenfold during COVID. So I spent, 17 hours a day sat in the back bedroom of a house, inventing a desktop process to allow HSBC to continue to lend, knowing every single time we were successful with it, you knew that when the market came back, they were going to use that product more and more because it worked. And I think that was the point for me, that I thought actually setting up a survey-only practice at some point in the future is the right thing to do, because people will start to lean towards getting advice. And the interesting thing is, Kev, nearly 50% of all the consumers that buy from us are first-time buyers. So it's also the mindset of the individuals. They're buying older, more dilapidated stock now because that's what they've got to do to get a foothold on the ladder. And things going wrong with those properties will cause them a bigger issue financially. So I think they're just taking that sort of security, which even for me is a surprise that, since the data we've been gathering, finding more and more first-time buyers are the ones, you wouldn't think they're the ones that are going to outlay another 400, 500, 600 quid, but they seem to be that group of people.
Yeah. So it's more that than consumer duty then?
I think so, yeah. I think appetite. I do think brokers are tuned into it more now than ever before. I think historically, they probably wanted to avoid it at all costs so it didn't get in the way. Now they know the client will possibly go somewhere else, and that may mean they lose some control. So keeping hold of the customer during that process. But I'm not probably close enough to the broker conversations to say this is the thing that's made a difference at that space. Yeah. It's kind of the things that we see.
And it's not lenders that are driving this. But obviously you mentioned decoupling years ago.
Yeah, no.
They're not. There's
nowhere. It's people like you. It's businesses like yours that are making this available to people. That makes it easy to be instructed. And if you've got distribution that gives you the ability to deliver a quality service, that they'll choose it.
I think there's a question further on, I'm pretty sure, about coverage and stuff like that. And there's maybe some similarities between what we've experienced on the conveyancing side of things, certainly post-COVID.
Yeah.
And, I think there's maybe issues, certainly when the market recovered in that boom period after COVID, where capacity became a bit of an issue.
Yeah, 100%.
We'll probably cover that off. At some point. So if having a survey, if you're going to spend as much as you are on buying a house now, obviously it makes sense if you're in any doubt as to the condition to get it checked. Why do some people still skip surveys, and what are the risks in by doing that?
The reason why people skip it is a couple of things. One, well, it's probably three. One, cost. So how do you weave it in? But actually, when you look at the cost of moving home, it's a tiny fraction of that. I'm moving myself. I've just sold my house, and the moving costs, you look at it and go, wow, there's a lot here before, but 500-600 quid on a survey doesn't touch the sides for what you're doing. But it still seems to be something, because it's not a necessary purchase. Everything else in that transaction is just something that has to happen. The other is, I think some people think they know best. I think they'll walk around themselves and say, I've worked this out, it looks okay. And the caveat for me on that is, as I know, looking around houses for the last sort of couple of months or so, you only really get to see it a couple of times, and you can't get in the loft space, and you can't start looking around the property. And so actually, do you really get a good insight into that particular property? And I think one of the other key reasons, Kev, I think some people don't want to know. I think some people have fallen in love with a house that much they don't want to know if there's something not quite right. I think I do think that happens.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I think people think, you know what, I love it, let's just move in. There's a bit of that goes
then
on.
bite them in the ass further down the line.
Yeah, possibly. Or they're going to do works to it themselves, so think actually I'll fix that myself. Matter. But I mean, that's just an opinion. Being in that process, and particularly in the process, my partner saying, actually, if Pete comes to have a look at this, is he going to find a load of stuff wrong with it? Because if he is, I really want this house, Joe. That's where that's come from, and I can't imagine that's a unique conversation in relationships.
Yeah, interesting, because again, like you say, it's a fraction of the amount they're going to spend, and it just seems. Is it the fact they're thinking, right? Well, if I do this and I find 3 or 4 houses, I've got to do it 3 or 4 times. Yeah. Is it a cumulative cost rather than a singular cost?
Possibly, but I think the market is such a way at the moment that you have to lock onto a property, don't you? When you've found one that you want, you almost have to lock onto it. And
you tell me, mate, you're the one that's moving at the minute.
That's exactly what's happening. You have people coming to look at your house that haven't got theirs on the market yet, but they don't want to put it on the market until they've found something they really want. Then you talk to your agent about, look, can we just stop letting people come to see the house that aren't proceedable? Then you're limiting your options about who is and who isn't proceedable, so you start to open the doors back up to that again. It's a whole cycle of, I'm living it.
You sound like you're having fun. Yeah, it is. It's stress that we spoke about with everybody else on the podcast so far.
And I didn't actually... I'm completely naive to that process because I only deal with one element of it. I've never dealt with any other part of it, actually. I've never been involved in the brokerage side of things. But being the consumer in the middle of that process, it's a mess. The amount of times we've filled out documentation with the same pieces of data on over and over and over again. The amount of phone calls I get about, just so you know, this is what you need to do next. No one at the start of the process has said, look, this is your circumstances, this is your property, this is the one you're looking to purchase, and here's all the things you're going to need to get available. You just find out when you get there. There's no plan, which is a shame, really. You can see why people want to change it, but there's a lot going on in there, isn't there, for you to unpick all that.
And it's who's responsible for
who's going to do
which part of it.
Yeah, who's going to do it.
Interesting, because that's been mentioned in previous, in terms of people wanting to take control of the whole process, and who is that right person?
Yeah.
And is that the agent? Is it the broker? Is it does that add reliance to the solicitor? It is such a fragmented.
Yeah, definitely.
Fragmented piece. Okay. Has the role of surveyor changed in recent years?
Yes and no. So the role of a surveyor has always been to give good quality advice to a consumer, always. And that,
you're saying that's changed now then?
No, I think the type of surveyors have changed. This industry has seen a seismic shift in the types of surveyors that are involved in going out there and doing that. And I think as a result of that, the customer's experience of a survey process is better now than ever.
Just elaborate on that a little bit more. Are we saying there's a different generation of surveyors, or
yeah?
Is it different?
I did
qualifications needed.
I did a podcast yesterday, and this same subject came up. And historically, surveyors were interested in, get me a big basic. I want a three series BMW. And I just want to be told what to do, and I'll go and get the job done, and I'll come back, and I'm comfortable at that. Actually, now, the group of surveyors, it's why we've managed to do what we can do. It's why we've managed to migrate 50% of our workforce over to being a franchise, because they're entrepreneurial. And what comes with that entrepreneurial nature is their want and need to speak to consumers. Whereas historically, you've got surveyors turning up at estate agents, collecting the keys and clearing off. Actually, in this world, They're now interested. How's the market going? What's it looking like around here? Have you got somebody that you refer your surveys to, and actually picking the phone up to the customer before they go and see the property and talk to them about, why have you paid for this? What is it you're concerned about? Because there is always something. That's what's changed. The role of a surveyor being able to deliver good advice, whether that's valuation or whether it's condition, should never change. The way in which it's done, I think, definitely has done.
So with them being a franchise rather than an employee, does that create more of a risk to you guys? Did it affect insurance and things like that?
It would. You would think so, because you'd think actually people are coming into your infrastructure and you don't know too much about them. But interestingly, we've never recruited a franchise cold. So no one's come to us. We've had advanced conversations with people, but no one's ever come and said, I'll take a franchise and I'll just start. What it's done is absolutely double down on the way in which we can recruit surveyors in, because what they're doing is saying, I'll come in, I want to get my head around your processes. We want to get a head around whether their quality audit and the controls that sit around them are any good. And then as they start to build their relationships at local level, they migrate themselves into the franchise from an earning potential. So for us, the sort of franchise has been an unintended consequence, giving us the ability to grow. So, and to your question about does it affect your insurance? Our turnover's improved by 30 odd to 40% in the last 12 months. Our PI stayed the same. That doesn't happen in surveying practices. They generally do push your PIs, but the risks associated just don't look to exist.
And do these guys have to have a minimum level of experience in surveying?
Oh, yeah. So these guys are coming through, really. They can't really take a franchise with us until they've been with us 18 to 24 months. And we bring some of the guys straight from Sava. So some of the guys, Sava, the training course, they're very green at that point. And Pete, as you know, spends a lot of time developing those people into where they are. So they need a couple of years. Right. There will be some exceptions to that. You may find some surveyors that have been builders for 25 years and then they've trained themselves to be a surveyor. They're different because they understand fabric, the way in which properties are built, the way in which they're put together, and that's a very good survey-only surveyor. The
reason I ask is just there's some consultancy models within the conveyancing sector at the minute, I'm just seeing with you look at a panel and look at the demographic of conveyancers on the panel. They're a lot younger now than what they were maybe even. So you think back to 2008 and COVID, you've seen an awful lot of conveyancers leave the industry, and therefore that experience hasn't come back. So the question was if that's happened with surveyors.
Consultancy models never worked in surveying. Yeah. So even when I was running a corporate and you'd have sort of 10, 15, 20 consultants to give work to, you're not their priority. They're always the surveyors whose reports are latest. This is sweeping statements now, but they generally are those, because if they backed themselves enough to set their own practice up, and if they wanted security, they'd go and work for somebody, because you can get a job in surveying like that. Mm-hmm. These franchise guys for us are almost, we want that entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to go and build local relationships, but I don't want to take on admin. I don't want to have to worry about my systems and the processes and sending terms and conditions and answering the phone in the loft space when I'm trying to see if the house is any good or not. It removes all those things.
Does it help also with capacity issues? I think we've had there's been a few rounds over the last few years where capacity's become tight within conveyancing. And if that's happened in conveyancing, it almost certainly will have happened with surveying. So I think the question on that is, are you confident that we're always in a position where we can cover postcodes?
Yeah, I mean, there's two elements to it, really. You have to be careful not to build, when you're running a practice that's not a panel manager, let's say, you have to be careful not to build your capacity in front of your volumes, because you end up with people sat with nothing to do. And on a fixed cost model, that's disaster. So you almost have to look at the areas that are starting to creak from a service perspective, and that's where you go and get people. As an organisation, for us, we've never struggled with recruitment. The industry does at times. We've sort of never struggled. So we've tried to create a cultural business that people go, do you know what, I can get a job there, and also I've got something that's available to me in the future, so it appeals on that level. But the surveying industry is always, even at valuation levels, always had capacity problems. There was at one point, there was a problem out in Norfolk, and then a year later, you know, the surveyor sat twiddling the thumbs because everyone goes and solves the problem. East London was a problem, Kent was a problem at one point, South Coast, you know. But some of the capacity constraints that you see in the market today are moments in time. You get that, you know, the Northwest has been busy for nearly 4 years now. You know, some of the surveys that we've got there have not had an empty diary ever in that period of time. And that's because, you know, you'll know better than me, interest rate changes don't affect lower value areas as much as they do in London. In the London market, we've seen it being quite strained there. You know, we're having to chase work down a lot more. And then the other thing that we've got access to is we've got panel firms. We've utilised panel firms before.
That's the next question really.
Yeah, built networks of hundreds of surveyors before that if we need to, we can fall back and give them work.
Yeah, a little bit of back scratching.
Yeah, of course.
Each way, yeah. So I mean, you've answered it. That was the question: is do you have an element of that panel side of it?
Yeah, we run a small panel for one of the corporate businesses that we work with. We run a small panel for sort of hotspot areas that you can't quite get enough work to fill yourself in. So they're normally the sticky out bits of the country, your Cornwalls, you know, your bits of Wales, the areas that you say actually it's not worth it for me to put somebody in. But that changes if you look at franchise. So if that individual then goes and builds localised relationships and they can fill themselves for a couple of days a week, all of a sudden that's a different dynamic and changes the way that you approach that.
Yeah. Having set this up and being self-employed for God knows how long, it resonates. Yeah. If you drive yourself, you're gonna do okay out of it.
Yeah.
So, should the UK move towards more upfront information before properties hit the market? Massively topical question.
I mean, in the middle of the mix, yeah. As a consumer sat here saying absolutely. There's mixed reviews in the surveying fraternity about this. Some surveyors say absolutely not. If the survey's done up front and the homeowners asked to do that, as you know, Scottish model, that kind of world, it will diminish. Yeah, it will diminish the quality of that survey.
Why?
Because their view is, and I'm not fussed either way, if I'm perfectly honest. But the view is that those reports will be dumbed down so you can get more and more of them done. And they like them.
So a capacity issue would reduce.
But for me, a capacity issue is a perfect storm, because what I also know is if you looked at the valuation surveys that operate across the industry today, transforming that mindset from value into condition is much harder than people think it's going to be. And at that point there, a survey-only business that sits in the middle of all that understands condition of property should become quite valuable, and also have the ability to service clients within that space, because those guys know how to do it anyway.
And maintain the capacity or not?
Correct, yeah. Because you'd improve capacity, because if the report's, you know, slightly more simple, then surveyors may be able to get 3 of those done a day, which increases your ability to get work done.
I mean, an interesting one. That obviously, if you're saying numbers go up, quality goes down. Yeah, that's absolutely been the issue with conveyancing.
Yeah.
Capacity has just been. It's not necessarily the capacity; it's the fact that the cases are stuck, and therefore your numbers go up, and organically, and the service drops. So you're not one for hips and reintroducing the hip.
No, that was a bit before my time. So I do think there's a value to that mimicking of the Scottish process. I do. I've seen a bit of that when I was involved with a business that had got a sort of Scottish arm, and those businesses culturally work really, really well. In fact, some of the principles of those business I've kind of utilised within mine. They have very they run them as regional offices. They build relationships with local estate agents. They run them as unique businesses within their areas. They'll have graduates that run through that learn from the guys that are local to them. I like that. I like that model. And we've tried to recreate some of that in our business around the way in which the teams are set up.
But it's interesting that you say you're looking to move at the minute. If you weren't in surveying, would you not want to, the properties you're going to see, would you not want to be able to see a report on it?
Yeah, of course I would.
So you do. So it's got
It drives. That's what I'm saying. It's hard, isn't it? Because you have conflicted views. If you've got a business that relies on those sorts of markets, you can convince yourself it's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
But as a consumer walking into the several properties that we've been to see, if I'd got a view that said actually there's this right, that wrong, this wrong, that's wrong, brilliant. I've got a decision to make about whether I'm prepared to take that on or not.
Rather than finding out
Correct.
6-8 weeks down the line when you're invested in it.
If the report's detailed enough to find that answer. And that would be my only thing. If the report's not detailed enough to find that answer, they're not worth it to anybody.
Interesting. Okay. Collaboration in the industry. How could surveyors, estate agents, brokers and solicitors work better together to improve the process for the customer?
It's a good question, Kev.
I didn't write it.
Yeah, no, I don't know whether I can answer it. I think there'd be, for me, I can probably answer this better as a consumer in the middle of the process. I think the thing for me would be give people right at the start of the process an almost a signpost that says this is where you're going to end up. Here's everything you need to do to get your ducks in a row to get to the end. And by the way, these things you've got to get done sooner rather than later. Luckily, I understand quite a chunk of the transaction, and some of the lingo that you see on some of the letters you receive, you think normal people wouldn't understand what that's supposed to mean. It's that as well. It's the transparency of the language that's used, particularly from the lawyers, about what you should and shouldn't be doing. And the other thing as well, there's got to be, I won't name who the firm is, but the firm that we're using to move house, I had to go and take, a 50-page document that was handwritten and drop it at their offices. That is madness. It's just madness.
What, detailing your property?
Correct.
Yeah. You should use a firm that's digital, mate.
Yeah.
A better customer journey.
Yeah. So for me, I think there's lots of things. I think centralising data points would be an absolute critical one for me. The surveying industry's done that really well over the last 10 years. Particularly in the valuation world. Historically, surveyors used to have to look in the footwell of the car to work out. So the Coventry Building Society don't lend above 4 stories, and I'm at a 5th story flat today, and it's in this book in the front of my car. The tech involved in, Virgin Money asked for the thickness of the walls, very, very unique details to particular lenders. But ultimately, the technology that's been integrated into that market has been defined in such a way that says, actually, I'll collect all the data once and I'll ping it out to Virgin Money, I'll ping it out to Nationwide or Coventry, and actually the data is all collected at the same time. That kind of element would work really well in this space.
And how I'm guessing it's just trusted data.
Correct.
That the industry's just agreed that they're going to accept. Because that's been probably the sticking point on conveyancing for a while is, who's provided the data? Can you trust it?
Yeah.
And again, provenance of that is it's starting to move from the conveyancing space. I think they're finally realising that it's nuts. You're filling out your forms where you've got to fill your name and address 3 or 4 different times. It's just crazy. But that's oversimplifying it. There's an awful lot of important data.
Correct.
That could be given into one space.
The thing that happens there, Kev, is if you're filling out the same mundane data in all the time, that people lose the will to live on the stuff that's the important bit. And actually, it's like anything, isn't it? If you've only got 5 things to do, they get done really well. If you've got 150 things to do, you're spreading yourself quite thin.
I genuinely don't understand any firm that's still operating on paper.
Yeah.
Forms. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. How can solicitors, conveyancers work better together when legal issues overlap with physical issues? So, i.e., you get the problem.
Yeah, I think that's about communication. I think one of the things that we've worked really hard on is to try and bring people into the story, so to speak. So one of the historic reasons why agents, particularly agents, would be really nervous about instructing a surveyor was if he goes and pulls it apart, we tell the client and all of a sudden that's the end of it, and they're off, and they lose that transaction altogether. And I think what the surveyors, and that's why I said to you a bit earlier on about the surveyors have built relationships.
Isn't
that
that better to them anyway, and they're not wasting the time by taking it on if they don't know it?
Yeah, 100%. It's better for them reputationally, because ultimately they're giving the client the advice at the right time, and they're going to give them the ability to renegotiate or talk about what they do to resolve that problem.
And sometimes it's it's cruel to be kind, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think some of that, Kev, comes back to the way the surveyors interact. Just sending that report to the client, dropping the grenade in, and waiting for them to deal with that themselves is not the right thing to do. So that's why I said that the surveyors that are either moving into the industry or are within the industry, we've been lucky, and it's part of our recruitment criteria. Really, is they've got to be a good person. That's of course they've got to be a good surveyor. Of course they've got to understand property. But as a human being, they've got to be able to do the right thing. If they're that kind of person, they'll pick the phone up to their client and say, "Look, just to let you know, this is what I found." Pete did a survey, prime example. Pete did a survey on a property for my sister-in-law. They'd fallen for it. It was a small sort of 2-bed sort of townhouse. Everything looked great. They could not see why I was pushing them to say, "Look, please let me send Pete for you." They're 21 and 24. That's the first house they've bought. She's just got a job as a teacher. And I said, "There's just please do that. It's a 1900s property. Let's get a look at it." Pete rang me within 20 minutes of being on site. I was like, "Joe, this is a disaster." He said the roof's leaking. It's leaking all the way through the house. It's run down the back of the kitchen units, and everything's rotted from the outside in. And they've just put new kitchen units on, so it looks good. Okay. Now, people wouldn't know that, and it's a perfect example of actually for the £400-500 it costs them to check. That's a serious issue for a young couple like that are purchasing a property, thinking actually we're stretching ourselves on budget, we're stretching ourselves on the mortgage payment, and ultimately I've now got a £20,000 roof to fix on the property. What happens to them in that situation? It's a disaster.
So I mean, would the suggestion there be, because it's 1900, you go for the full-on building survey, and would that always pick it up?
Yeah, definitely. The way in which, I'm not a surveyor, so I can't comment too much on the way in which they go about their work, but I've been around it long enough to know that one of the key things for them is they follow the trail. If they find damp somewhere in the property, it's coming from something, and they'll go and find it. That meticulous nature of surveyors is brilliant. You won't get surveyors
if they've hidden it by putting in a new kitchen, would you spot the damp in the first place?
Yeah, because what they'd do is they'd see that in the roof space. So surveyors will get themselves in there, look into the roof space. So it's the things, that's why I said, when you go and look at a property, you're not rolling around in the loft, are you, amongst people's suitcases? You're just looking at it and seeing if it works for you.
Yeah. Okay. So does that, that probably answers this question partly, but in your opinion, where do communication breakdowns usually happen during the transaction?
Where surveyors are concerned, not keeping people informed about what they've found. I think it's the absolute critical piece, and I think where relationships are concerned, I think it's important that people let the people know that have instructed the survey, look, there's something not right with this, and it's not going to go to plan, but here's the 4 things. This is what we expect it is. As an indicative, it's a new roof on this one, so you're going to have to talk to the client about what that means. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean it stops the sale. It just means that people understand it. So you said it's that, it's better the devil you know, isn't it, about at that point?
But obviously there's a duty to report it to the lender, or is the lender really that bothered?
The lender doesn't care in some respects about those sorts of things, because it's been valued. This is where the differential comes, isn't it? So the valuation doesn't care whether it's got granite worktops or the kitchen's been done nicely. It's about whether they'll get the money back if the customer doesn't pay them. And that's the top and bottom of the valuation space. And loan to value plays a big part in that. It's whether the loan to value is close enough for someone to care.
And you've hit probably the nail on the head there. Is, does the client understand that?
Absolutely not. Well, that was the reason why all those years ago, Kev, people are buying value, paying for a valuation that's been requested by the bank, getting it back and thinking on a 3-page tick box exercise, brilliant, someone's been to see it, it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Next bit is the buyer and the common issues. What can a survey reveal that a viewing won't show up?
God.
Have you got a list?
It's the things with surveys, it's roofs, damp, cracking. And it's the reason why properties crack and those sorts of things. Is it plaster or is it structural? It's all those sorts of things. I mean, things like structural issues should get kicked out at valuation stage. So that should kick out a PVQ that then says, right, we probably need to instruct a structural engineer.
At lender valuation stage?
Lender valuation stage should do.
But what if they're not going to the property and just doing it desktop?
Well, this is the issue. You know, if you've got that increase, and that's why the numbers of consumers that are purchasing surveys now are going more and more. And the other thing as well that kicks that on is you've got, you know, disposable income is pulling down, so actually people's ability to maintain properties isn't as good as it used to be. So they're dilapidating quicker than they ever were. So the stock that's on the market is not as good anyway. But to your point, roofs, big issue, damp, cracks, woodworm. You know, Pete's your best man for this question, but one of the things, because I asked him about this before we came on, I said if this sort of thing comes up, and he said things like suspended floors. You know, flooring, people just don't jump up and down and see whether there's something right or wrong with them. He says, but we can tell that sort of thing, and they're very expensive to fix. Should
if the broker's there for at the start of the transaction, should they be aware of all this stuff? You know, do you think brokers are aware that, you know, these are the common flaws that you should be looking for, and, you know, maybe educating the client a little bit more?
I think they should. I think in all spaces you're going to get the brokers that are really engaged in their customer and want to make sure they get the best possible outcome. It's not all about the financial benefit. It's not all about the service. It's all about the service, because actually, as you and I both know, that means that customer comes back and back and back in that world. So you've got one for life. And I think you'll probably also know within your numbers, you'll have people that are prolific referrers of work, because that's the way those businesses operate. And you'll have some of your people that just never send a survey across. They're the ones that need the work. The ones that get it, clearly, they are advising the client, look, we need to be careful here. This is the sort of stuff that's, you know, starting to get to clients and the things that are looking more costly in the future. But there are some of the brokers that just want to get it through. They want to get it through nice and clean. They're not bothered about referral fees, because actually they're more bothered about the prop fee. That's the big ticket item to them. And I think that's the shift in mindset. So
the most common cost issues buyers discover too late, you'd say, would be roofs?
Yeah, definitely. Damp, cracks, you know, if there's woodworm and things like roofs, and, you know, it's seriously problematic, you know, lack of bracing and all those sorts of things, it's issues.
Okay. What are the 3 questions every buyer should ask before making an offer?
This one's come left field.
And put yourself in that, obviously you're in that position at the minute.
Yeah, the thing for us was, because I understand the survey process, I asked about services to the property. So things like boiler, electrics, they're not picked up within that. But for me, those things are really important to people. They're, again, expensive problems to solve. You know, if you've got to rewire property or put a new boiler into the property, it's problematic and expensive. So there's
literally just had to do that with the house I bought.
Yeah.
But I knew before. But
yeah. So there's those sorts of things that are an issue. I personally, I mean, a good one is why they're moving. So is there a particular reason that they've chosen to up sticks? Is it's an area that that's problematic? Have they been burgled? You know, simple things like, have they been burgled recently, and is that one of the reasons why they're looking to come away? So it's always in people's minds. And they may not tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But for me, it's those sorts of questions, really.
What's your advice for first-time buyers trying to balance the budget and protection?
Get a survey every time. Don't sacrifice the cost for security. So one of the things that we're very, very close to integrating now is which sounds a daft thing, but we're giving consumers the ability to klarna the survey costs, so they can spread the cost out over a period of time. Yeah. Make it more available to them financially at a time when they're always, you know, putting cash out. Because actually, if you really commit to that says, actually, let's make sure this is affordable for people over a period of time and still get them to get the survey done, we suspect that will improve the people that say yes to taking one.
Maybe the government needs to start looking at stuff like that for stamp duty, and I think that might have been mooted, but
Yeah.
Okay. We like to finish off the podcast just asking a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
So hopefully none of these are going to catch you out. As the podcast is called The Next Move, we've got some quick fire questions. First one being, what's the strangest thing you've ever found during a survey?
As I said, I'm not a surveyor.
What's Pete then?
Pete's found all sorts of stuff. The worst thing for him is, it's probably not bad, but the worst thing for him is when he goes to property and it's got rats.
Oh.
He says that you come across that much more common than you think, and they're just not nice. So,
Live or dead?
But both. It's one of them days where he's definitely as quickly back as possible to get a shower. Bless him. And I'm just in the office.
Yeah, but,
there are some other things that people have come across, but I don't think the podcast is the right place for it.
I think we all know what that is. Yeah,
rooms with swings and all sorts of stuff.
I think we can go on, keep going.
Yeah.
What's the biggest red flag on viewing from a surveyor's point of view?
The biggest red flag
on a viewing from a surveyor's point of view?
Not being let into places in the property. So
what, certain parts of the property or in at all?
No, certain parts of the property. You'll find at times where the people in the property will say, "Oh, you can't go in there," or "You're not supposed to go there," or you know, "We're all right with you going."
That's where the swing is, mate.
Yeah, there can be that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've gone well off piece now. You're right.
What's one thing buyers ignore too often?
I think for me, it's got to be that head and heart around spend the money to find out the answer and deal with it. So get the answer, deal with it, and go from there. I think there's definitely head and heart transactions when people are looking to purchase properties.
Yeah.
It's an emotional time anyway for lots of different reasons, but I think it's one of those that people really, and that's because some of that's because the process is long and drawn out, and you never feel like it's yours until you're in. So for example, you know, we're moving to move the kids' schools. So we've been to see schools. We've got them, you know, we've got them places where we need to be. It still might not happen. Something could still go wrong. So you know, you're sort of living on your nerves a little bit with those sorts of things.
I think you've answered this one in terms of home buyers report or full building survey. You're just saying that's really property dependent, aren't you?
Yeah, 100% property dependent to get the best outcome, so that the surveyor is the right one and looking for the right stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Joe, thanks a lot for today. I think the takeaway from us on that is, make sure that what you're doing it's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy.
Yeah.
Make sure it's the right one for you. Make sure condition wise, for the fact of a few £100.
Yeah, definitely.
Find out your problems before it's too late.
Yeah.
And that if you instruct, you're going to get advice in terms of what's the best thing for you to go for.
Yeah, 100%. And do that versus the security of it. Do that. Take that survey.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers, Kev.
Cheers. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to let us know in the comments below. See you again soon.